The year is 323 BC. In a palace in Babylon, the greatest conqueror the world has ever seen lies dying. He is 32 years old. He has conquered Egypt, Persia, Afghanistan, the edges of India. His generals gather around his deathbed and ask one final question. Who should inherit your empire? Alexander opens his eyes one last time. The strongest, he whispers. Then he is gone. But here is what nobody told you about Alexander the Great. The genetics that built his extraordinary mind and body have never been properly examined. Because Alexander was not just a conqueror, he was a genetic anomaly, a product of one of history's most extraordinary population mixtures. And today, DNA science is finally answering the question historians have debated for 2,000 years. Who were the Greeks? Where did they really come from? And what happened to their genetics after centuries of invasion, occupation, and empire? The answer will shock you. Because modern Greeks are not who you think they are. And ancient Greeks were not who they thought they were. This is the Greek DNA mystery. To understand Greek DNA, we need to go back further than Greece itself. 7,000 years ago, farmers from Anatolia, modern Turkey, began migrating westward across the Aegean Sea. They brought agriculture, wheat, barley, cattle. These were not Greeks. They had no concept of Greece. But they were the genetic foundation upon which Greek civilization would eventually be built. Then, around 5,000 years ago, a second wave arrived. From the Pontic-Caspian steppe, the grasslands stretching from Ukraine to Kazakhstan, skilled horsemen, warriors, speakers of Proto-Indo-European, the ancestor of nearly every European language spoken today. They swept westward across Europe, and when they reached the Aegean world, they mixed with the Anatolian farmers already there. The result of that mixture would eventually produce the Greeks. But first, the Minoans. The island of Crete, 2700 BC. A civilization is emerging that will stun archaeologists 4,000 years later. Palace complexes with running water, sophisticated art, a writing system called Linear A that we still cannot read. For centuries, historians assumed the Minoans were ancestors of the ancient Greeks. Then, in 2017, a landmark study published in the journal Nature analysed DNA from ancient Minoan skeletal remains. The results were stunning. The Minoans were not descended from steppe nomads or mainland Europeans. They were predominantly of Anatolian farmer ancestry, the same farming populations who had migrated from Turkey thousands of years earlier. The Minoans were Europe's first advanced civilization, but they were not Greek. The first true Greeks were the Mycenaeans. The same 2017 study analysed Mycenaean remains and found something crucial. Mycenaeans shared the Anatolian farming base with the Minoans, but carried something the Minoans did not. Steppe ancestry. Approximately 10 to 15% of their DNA traced back to the Pontic-Caspian steppe. This steppe ancestry brought the Greek language itself to the Aegean world. The Mycenaeans were the warriors of Homer's Iliad, the civilization that launched 1,000 ships to Troy. They used a writing system called Linear B, which we can read. They traded across the Mediterranean, built palace economies, and then, around 1200 BC, everything collapsed. In the space of 50 years, nearly every major civilization in the ancient world collapsed simultaneously. Mycenaean Greece, the Hittite Empire, Ugarit, Cyprus. Historians call it the Bronze Age collapse, one of history's greatest mysteries. The causes remain uncertain, a combination of invasions by the mysterious sea peoples, severe drought leading to famine, earthquakes, and the collapse of the Mediterranean trade networks that held these civilizations together. Whatever the precise cause, the Mycenaean world was destroyed. Palace complexes abandoned, writing forgotten, population levels collapsed dramatically. Greece entered nearly 300 years of darkness. Then slowly, new peoples migrated down from the north. The Dorians, speakers of a different Greek dialect, carrying slightly different genetic profiles. When Greece re-emerged from the Dark Ages around 800 BC, it was a genetically layered population. Anatolian farmer base, steppe Indo-European ancestry, Mycenaean heritage, Dorian newcomers. From this mixture, classical Greece was born. Now we arrive at the question that launched this documentary. Who was Alexander the Great, genetically speaking? Alexander was born in 356 BC in Pella, the capital of Macedon, a kingdom in northern Greece. And this immediately creates a controversy that has lasted 2,400 years. Were Macedonians actually Greek? The ancient Greeks debated this furiously. The Athenians considered Macedonians semi-barbarians. Alexander had to prove his Greek ancestry just to compete in the Olympic Games. Ancient DNA from burial sites in Macedonia, including from the royal cemetery at Vergina, where Alexander's father, Philip II, is believed to be buried, reveals a fascinating picture. Macedonians showed genetic profiles similar to northern Greek populations, but with slightly higher proportions of steppe ancestry than southern Greeks, like Athenians or Spartans. They were genetically Greek, but a version of Greek shaped by closer contact with populations to their north and east. This genetic mixture may have contributed to what made Alexander extraordinary. Ancient traditions describe him as having one eye dark as night and one eye bright as the sky, a detail that, whether legend or truth, made him appear marked by the gods to those who followed him. Plutarch describes his complexion as fair with a ruddy glow across his face and chest. Curtius Rufus describes light skin and an expressive gaze that captivated everyone around him. These physical traits, light skin, fair colouring, dramatic flushing, are consistent with someone carrying significant steppe ancestry, the same genetic markers that shaped Northern European pigmentation. Alexander the Great may have looked more like a Northern European than the dark Mediterranean figure popular imagination typically pictures. He was the product of 7,000 years of Aegean genetic history, Anatolian farmers, steppe warriors, Bronze Age Mycenaeans, compressed into one extraordinary human being. When Alexander died, his generals divided his empire. Ptolemy took Egypt, Seleucus took Persia. Each established Greek-speaking ruling dynasties. Each created cities where Greek colonists settled and mixed with local populations. Greek soldiers, merchants, and administrators settled across Egypt, Persia, Afghanistan, and the edges of India. They married local women. Their children spoke Greek, but carried mixed ancestries. Genetic studies of ancient populations from Egypt, the Levant, and Central Asia show detectable Greek genetic signatures appearing suddenly in the Hellenistic period. Genetic echoes of Alexander's conquests visible in DNA 2,300 years later. The most famous example? Cleopatra VII. Despite ruling Egypt, Cleopatra was ethnically Macedonian Greek, a descendant of Ptolemy, one of Alexander's generals. She was the first member of her dynasty to actually learn the Egyptian language. Egypt's most famous pharaoh was genetically a Macedonian Greek. Roman conquest of Greece began in 146 BC. For 500 years, Greece was a Roman province. But here is what is genetically remarkable. Rome loved Greece. Roman aristocrats sent their sons to Athens to study. Roman religion absorbed Greek gods wholesale. The Romans conquered Greece politically. Greece conquered Rome culturally. Then came Byzantium, the Eastern Roman Empire centered on Constantinople, surviving for 1,000 years as the keeper of Greek civilization. But new populations were moving in. Between 500 and 700 AD, Slavic peoples migrated south from the Balkans into mainland Greece in significant numbers. Genetic studies of modern Greeks do show a detectable Slavic ancestry component, particularly in northern Greece, reflecting these medieval migrations. Then, in 1453, Constantinople fell to the Ottoman Turks. 400 years of Ottoman rule followed. 4 centuries during which Greek Orthodox Christians maintained their language, their religion, and their identity. In exactly the same way, Estonians maintained their language under Russian rule. Cultural resistance became genetic preservation. When Greece finally achieved independence in 1821, after nearly 400 years of Ottoman rule, the genetic question became politically explosive. Were modern Greeks truly descended from the ancient Greeks? Or had centuries of invasion and mixing erased the ancient legacy? When geneticists began studying modern Greek populations, they found something that surprised everyone. Modern Greeks are primarily descended from ancient Greek populations. Studies published in Nature found that modern Greeks cluster genetically closest to ancient Mycenaean samples, the Bronze Age Greeks of 3,500 years ago. The ancient genetic foundation survived, but layered with additions across the centuries. Modern Greeks carry approximately 55 to 65% Aegean and Anatolian farmer ancestry, the ancient bedrock from the original Neolithic farmers who arrived 7,000 years ago. 15 to 20% Steppe and Indo-European ancestry, brought by the Bronze Age migrations that created the Mycenaeans and the Greek language itself. 10 to 15% additional Near Eastern ancestry, accumulated through Hellenistic, Roman, and Byzantine period mixing. 5 to 10% Slavic ancestry, the medieval migrations into mainland Greece. 3 to 7% Central Asian ancestry, the Ottoman period genetic legacy. The ancient Aegean core is still the dominant component. The Greeks of today are genetically continuous with the Greeks of antiquity. But they are not identical. They carry within them the genetic signatures of every civilization that ever conquered, traded with, or occupied the ancient world. Here is perhaps the most remarkable genetic fact about ancient Greece. Greek culture spread so far, so fast during the Hellenistic period that Alexander's genetic legacy may be found today not primarily in Greece, but scattered across the Middle East and Central Asia. Populations in Afghanistan, Iran, and Pakistan carry detectable Hellenistic-era European ancestry that appears in very low frequencies compared to their neighbours. Genetic whispers of the armies that once marched through. In the Hunza Valley of northern Pakistan, a community called the Barusho people have maintained for centuries an oral tradition claiming descent from soldiers in Alexander's army. DNA studies have found only a small Greek genetic signal, grouping the Barusho primarily with their South Asian neighbours rather than with Greek populations. The Alexander connection remains a powerful legend rather than a proven genetic fact. But nearby, the Kalash people of Pakistan show unusual genetic distinctiveness, and some researchers have noted their profiles show similarities to ancient West Eurasian populations. The genetic echo of the Hellenistic expansion may exist in this region, but science has not yet fully confirmed exactly where. He set out to conquer the world, and the genetic traces of that conquest are still being found. What does it mean to be Greek? For 2,500 years, Greek civilization has defined Western culture. Democracy, philosophy, theatre, mathematics, the Olympic Games, the very alphabet you are reading these words in. All of it traces back to a rocky peninsula in the eastern Mediterranean, and to the remarkable genetic mixture of peoples who converged there. Anatolian farmers who crossed the Aegean 7,000 years ago. Steppe nomads who brought horses and language sweeping westward from the grasslands of Asia. Bronze Age warriors who built Mycenae and fought at Troy. Romans, Slavs and Ottomans who left their genetic signatures across centuries of occupation. And through all of it, the ancient Aegean genetic core persisting, surviving, refusing to disappear. Modern genetics confirms what Greek civilization always claimed about itself. Identity is not about purity, it is about continuity. The Greeks were never one people. They were always a convergence of migrations, of cultures, of genes, of ideas. That convergence produced Homer, Plato, Aristotle, Alexander. And when Alexander lay dying in Babylon, asking who should inherit his empire, the real heirs were not his generals, not his dynasty. The real heirs are the billions of people who live in societies shaped by Greek democracy, thinking concepts developed by Greek philosophy, and carry somewhere in their ancestry the ancient DNA of the Aegean world. The strongest did inherit. All of us did.